Hi, here's part 2 to what is malpractice and animal magnetism. Hi, my name is Julie. I was born into the Christian Science church and religion, and after 40 years I went my own way. And I feel that brought me back to a clearer understanding of the original intent of Mary Baker Eddy's teachings, which is different than the religion and the church believe today. So I don't hold you in suspense again. Malpractice is, Mrs. Eddy defines it as a bland denial of truth. What is the truth? Well, the truth is that we're spiritual beings. That the material universe is thoughts, what we're experiencing as our thoughts dancing around. It's not a reality. It's not a real world. And our body is not a real identity, but we fell into the trap of believing it was. And we're going to have to unwind from that belief, even though it's not true. But we believe it is. So malpractice, the bland denial of truth, you could just say, I hate this political senator. That's malpractice. Just simply because the spiritual being beyond form, beyond body, the immortal soul that you're seeing as like a senator or a house, something like that, a political appointee, anything. The body, the one speaking and the one doing, that's not who they really are. That's the mesmerized self. That's the false image of them. So to say, I hate that body or that individual, that personality, is a bland denial of truth. You're denying the reality of who they really are. And in turn, it's denying the reality of who you really are. Since if you don't know who they are, you obviously don't know who you are. When Jesus said, love your enemies, he said, it was out of self-preservation. He was teaching us that. He was saying, it was the first steps, baby steps, kindergarten teachings as to why it's not a good idea to hate your enemies, because it's returning back to you that hate and that bland denial of truth, the truth about who they are and the truth about you are. I mean, that's just one of a gazillion examples of malpractice. Another would be, when I drink this drink, it's going to hydrate me. Why is that malpractice? Well, this is part of the illusion. This is part of the dream. The illusion doesn't have any effect on my real being. But I currently think it does. I currently think I'm a human living in a human world and that this drink hydrates me. So 99.9999999% of the people on the planet are malpracticing 99.9999999% of the time. There's only a few that are awake to who they really are and to what's really going on. You could say there's only a few who have unplugged themselves from the matrix. And it's something we do with the help of and at the direction of the divine mind, our real mind, soul. Animal magnetism is along this. It's the thoughts of all the mortals malpracticing each other every second and every minute of every day. But it's also larger than that. It's the grand illusion. It's the whole ball of wax. Animal magnetism is the belief of life, intelligence, truth, intelligence, and substance in matter. It's the mesmerism that we are in currently, and we got ourselves there. We can't really blame it on anyone else. We don't remember it. We didn't remember it. It didn't happen as we think it happened in this lifetime. Maybe we made a mistake and all of a sudden we thought we were immortal. No, we are eternal beings. This isn't our first rodeo. We've been around and around and around and around and around for eternity. But at some point, a little piece of us thought all the thoughts around us, that spiritual beings can see their thoughts. A little piece of us got glamored by it, and all of a sudden we were the seed of our being, the seed of our knowing seemed to move to a body. We seem to give this body our identity and acknowledge it as I, but it was never I. It was never me. It was never us. So animal magnetism is this grand farce, this grand thing that is going on that 99.9999999% of the people at this plane of existence are experiencing. And animal magnetism and is why Mrs. Eddy was here. The purpose of Mrs. Eddy's teachings were to define matter using the scientific statement of being. There's no life, truth, intelligence, or substance in matter. All is infinite mind and its infinite manifestation. So, what you see, hear, taste, touch, and smell isn't real. You are really the being beyond form, infinite mind, infinite life, infinite being. And the thoughts going on are your ideas, but they are not a substantial reality in and of themselves. In fact, what's going on, the appearances and all that stuff, is far removed from the reality that is going on in the soul. It's far removed from that. It's not even like, you can't even do a translation, a direct translation. Like my dad used to, it says somewhere, says that a stone is spiritual. And that's true, because if you keep what we see, hear, taste, touch, and smell in the perspective of its spirit, meaning it's our thoughts, it can't be anything else, because a spiritual being doesn't create matter, doesn't create something that's not in and of itself. It's how can you create something that's the opposite of you? They don't. The spiritual being doesn't. So there's not my dad always used to think that means there's a spiritual stone. There's not a spiritual stone. A stone is spiritual. It's a spiritual idea. But the soul isn't thinking stone and seeing it as matter stone. It's, if you look in the glossary, there's all kinds of definitions where she helps us translate material words into the spiritual truth. In Genesis, the chapter on Genesis, page 511, to mortal mind, the universe is liquid, solid, and aerial form. Spiritually interpreted, rocks and mountains stand for solid and grand ideas. So the being, soul, us, our true self, God, is having solid and grand ideas. And we are just seeing them interpreted this way as rocks, mountains. But there is no spiritual rock or spiritual mountain. So Mrs. Eddy's, she had a purpose. Her purpose was to define matter. Her purpose was then to explain to us, well, you fell into the trap that you believed matter was real. We'll give it a fancy name. It's animal magnetism. Your thoughts emanating, what appear to be emanating from that mortal thoughts, malpractice. So any thought that's originating as the mortal self that you believe you are, that's called malpractice. Any thoughts originating from soul would be, practice. And then she taught the lesson was how to get out of it, how to wake up from it, and it is through a process of self-examination, self-knowledge, mental purgation. And then and then another purpose was to, bring Christians forward into a more spiritual understanding of the Bible and of Jesus's teachings. And, one of the words she had to define was sin. She had to redefine these words to mortals who had taken these words and made them into something that they were not. And you can't understand the Bible, and you can't understand Jesus's teachings, and you can't understand, New Testament without understanding that sin, like in the article, The Human Concept in Retrospection and Introspection, she says sin was and is the lying supposition that life, substance, and intelligence are both material and spiritual, and yet separate from God. The first iniquitous manifestation of sin was affinity. So she was tasked with redefining to Christians, reminding them of the original intent of the words sin, baptism, atonement, surrender, all of these things, and to bring them forward another notch. It was Jesus was a course correction for the Jewish way of thinking. Jews had come this far and needed a course correction. That's what Jesus has provided. Then Mrs. Eddy, Christians came this far, and Mrs. Eddy provided a course correction. And that's part of the unwinding, is we as mortals are so solidly locked into this belief, and it's the self-perpetuating dream where, unless we learn to turn to God and turn to soul, turn to something outside of our little world that we've made, we can't get out. So there's all these teachings throughout history that have been like coming into mortal thought, and it's like the soul has been coming into mortal thought, our real being, and bringing the truth, and enlightening mankind. Mrs. Eddy had her role. This was her role. The healing of physical illness was the signs and wonders. Yes, this understanding, this unwinding process heals. As you unwind, you can be healed of every single disease in the entire universe. Any disease that can be, as you unwind, because the diseases are part of the illusion. That's it. It's just part of the confusion. And so, we're going to be healed. You're going to be healed as you unwind, but the healing is not the destination. The physical healing isn't where it should be. It shouldn't be our goal. It will happen if you're honest and you're sincere about this unwinding, and that you're turning to God, and you stop turning to people and you're asking them, even me, how do I do it? What do I do? Only the soul knows how you're wound up in the dream, and everybody's wound up differently. The soul meaning divine mind, your true nature. Only God, soul, knows how you're wound up in the dream. And the thing is to learn to listen and follow, and you're going to take many turns and twists and turns because you're wound up so tight that it can't just like, boop, okay, you're unwound now. It's like, let's unwind this little piece and then this little piece. And only divine mind knows which pieces to unwind first. So it's kind of it's an interesting ride. Mrs. Eddy says it gives us a much up. The warfare with oneself is grand. It gives us plenty of it gives you plenty of employment. Now that's true employment. It gives us plenty of employment. That's Miscellaneous 118, line 24. You know, other teachers have been sent or came here or brought themselves here, appeared to us in a form that we could understand. Mrs. Eddy appeared to us in a form that we could understand. Jesus appeared to us. The divine mind appeared to us as Jesus, which was a form that we could understand. The divine mind appeared to us as Mary Baker Eddy, as a form that we can understand. We also have Eckhart Tolle, and his purpose here is to teach us how to stay in the present moment, and that the present moment is all that there is. That's his entire teachings. Does he agree with Christian Science? Yes, he does. He understands there's no life, truth, intelligence, nor substance and matter, and all is infinite mind and its infinite manifestation. Yes, but that's not what he's supposed to be teaching. David Hoffmeister is a Course in Miracles teacher. His purpose is to maintain a correct, divine mind showed himself as Eckhart Tolle to teach now, the power of now. The divine mind is appearing as David Hoffmeister to teach us the correct application of the Course in Miracles to the unwinding of ourselves from the belief of life, truth, intelligence, or substance and matter. Does David Hoffmeister understand the truth of Christian Science? Yes, he does. But that's not his teaching. His teaching is the unwinding process. That's what the Course in Miracles is. And it is, so it has that purpose. And other teachers have come, to play their roles. So like as a Christian Scientist, to be thinking like, this is the be all and end all teaching and we don't need anything else. Well, it's everything you need to know, but it doesn't expand on everything. She doesn't expand on now. We know that now is all that there is, but there's a whole teaching that will help you see that in more depth. She didn't expand on how to unwind from the dream. It's because the Course in Miracles was coming 100 years later, and it would be the one to expand on how to unwind from the dream. And I know that there are others. And I know that there's other forms that the divine mind has appeared as, like our soul, our collective soul. We are collectively one, both individually and collectively one. So we, in our true nature, have appeared to us in our mesmerized state in many different teachings all over the world and throughout history, to reach the right people at the right time and to affect the changes that were needed to keep us moving out of, the dream of life, truth, intelligence, and substance and matter. So if Mrs. Eddy had this purpose, this was her purpose, this was her role, to teach us what's really going on. It's a pretty, it's a big role. because the self of us that's mortal, the collective mortal, there's only one seeming mortal mind. We're told there's many mortal minds. It only appears that there's many mortal minds, but collectively we're one mortal mind also. And the word evil applies to us in our mesmerized state. And yeah, we've burned people at the stake, and we crucified Jesus as a collective mortal mind. Anyone who comes into our purview who doesn't believe that what we believe, and who is saying something, we don't want to hear. Mrs. Eddy is basically telling us in our mortal sense, you're not real. And the soul knows that they are real. But the mortal self says, oh, no, I am real. And it fights back. And that's one of the ways it fought back, is it used people closest to Mrs. Eddy to try and derail the teachings. It used her son, it used her close students, it used church members. Church members wanted her out at the end of her life. They were like, we're gonna take over things. We feel like we know how to run the boat, and we're so tired of Mrs. Eddy thinking she knows everything. And her students, Woodbury and Stetson, and she had a bunch of students that were nutballs. And Mrs. Eddy, and Jesus had his Judas, but even his disciples drove him nuts. Doubting Thomas, and they all left and thought he died on the cross. If for you, you're like, haven't I been teaching you? And I've been telling you I'm gonna go and then I'll come back, and I've been teaching you all this stuff, and you think me, being on that cross and dying was like the end of our. Didn't you learn anything from me? Even in the Garden of Gethsemane, he's like, could you not wait with me, 1 hour? They couldn't stay awake with to be with him, the morning that, that night where he that morning, early morning hours when he was going to be crucified that day. That's because mortal mind is a deluded state of being, and it is not rational. It does not make sense. Have you seen, when students in one of the southern states, they were stopping segregation, and they were bringing Black students into white schools. And there's pictures of the people that lived in the town or went to the school. And while these Black students were being brought in by the police and the National Guard, and while they were being, these people's faces were like, oh my God, you guys are evil. This is evil. They were like, if go and Google, and look at these pictures of these beings, they're not beings, they're personalities, and how they reacted to the mere idea of, equality. Equality that many of us, a large number of us, now take for granted, or maybe we don't take it for granted. We understand the deep underlying equality of everyone that no one is better than another. But we have a long way to come. We have a long way to go as a collective. But you can look at these people's faces and you're like, that is pure evil. But it's pure mortality, pure mesmerism, pure animal magnetism, pure sin. We've all been there. Like when I started this process of self-examination, it was really hard for things to surface for me because I was really stuck in a sense of, I know everything. I know what's right and wrong and good and bad, and I know Christian Science, and this isn't Christian Science, and I can tell you that much. And I think back to the arrogance. Like arrogance could be synonymous with animal magnetism. Arrogance is the two, it's two-ness. Animal magnetism is two-ness. I am immortal and God is out there. My soul is out there. So it's a split mind. There's me as a soul, as divine mind, and me as, body, mortal mind. And that two-ness is what mortal mind likes, because oneness, mortal mind fears, because it means it's oblivion, since it's the unreality. It's gonna be gone. Mortal mind disappears. In Miscellaneous Writings 165, the material corporeality disappears. An individual spirituality, perfect and eternal, appears, never to disappear. That's what happens as we unwind from the dream. The material corporeality, the personality, the belief of life and matter disappears. And our true nature is then uncovered. It was always there. It only is uncovered. This is, not what mortal mind wants to hear. And so Mrs. Eddy, this is why she was here. This is what she was supposed to teach. Mortal mind then said, well, if we can't kill the air, where we've been using her son, her students, church members, everyone around her, so many Christian pastors and preachers, and Mark Twain. Mark Twain was fascinated with Mary Baker Eddy, wrote so much about Christian Science. I think wrote a book called Christian Science. And it was just like, what is this? And he was, both hated and just was mesmerized by her and the teachings. The truth always creates this chemical reaction in mortal mind. And she talks about it, this chemical reaction. And so, that's what you saw when you saw in the southern United States, when desegregation was occurring. These individuals that were hateful, angry, they could kill. They were so mad at this. That was chemicalization. That's the word I was looking for. In Miscellaneous Writings, line 10, this destruction is a moral chemicalization where old things pass away and all things become new. Pulpit and Press has something. This spiritual chemicalization is the upheaval produced when truth is neutralizing error and impurities are passing off. Mortal error, page 96 of Science and Health. Mortal error will vanish in a moral chemicalization. This mental fermentation has begun and will continue until all errors of belief yield to understanding. Belief is changeable, but spiritual understanding is changeless. Whenever an aggravation of symptoms has occurred, this look on those people's faces and their desire to kill. Whenever an aggravation of symptoms has occurred through mental chemicalization, I have seen the mental signs assuring me that the danger was over before the patient felt the change, which is mankind. And I have said to the patient, you are healed, sometimes to his discomfiture when he was incredulous, but always came as I foretold. That was Science and Health, page 168. You know, chemicalization is what you see happening as truth is uncovered more and more of us are waking up to who we really are. We're collectively one and individually one mortal mind. And so we're going through big, huge chemicalizations. You know, desegregation was only one of the infinite number of adjustments and chemicalizations that mankind has gone through. And Mrs. Eddy was bringing the ultimate truth, you know, the silver bullet to us. And whoa, the mental chemicalization that occurred, you know, when she brought this science. And then when she passed in 1910, how many people in the church understood the significance of her teaching? I mean, the signs and wonders of the physical healing, which she says is the smallest part of Christian Science. The signs and wonders were very mesmerizing for people. They were mesmerizing for practitioners, for teachers, for students, for workers in the movement, for people who worked at the mother church, people who worked at the branch churches. It is very mesmerizing. And pretty soon, like, this lady came to be like, you're not immortal. It's a grand delusion. We were tricked. We tricked ourselves. We now believe we're mortals, but we're these immortal beings. We are soul. We are the divine mind. We are not limited in any way. And this isn't our real home in our real world. I mean, we are home, but you're not seeing it. You're only aware of this lie. I mean, it's just like, and then 1910, and then all of a sudden, boom, 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 boom. And here we are in 2025, and it's all about physical healing. You know, one of the teachers that she, in her classes, she mostly teaches, you know, treatments and using formulas. And so she told her students, you know, don't share your notes with anybody, your class notes with anyone, because they're going to think I'm giving you formulas. And these aren't really formulas. They're just treatments. But it's like, you spend almost the entire class on teaching treatments. And these formulas that aren't formulas. And, you know, you haven't opened the eyes of your students to, like, you know, physical healing is the smallest part of Christian Science. Sorry, I probably should have told you that like early on. I maybe assumed you read the book, and it's in there. It says physical healing is the smallest part of Christian Science, and you know, and maybe I should have said that, and maybe I shouldn't have concentrated like 90% of my class on physical healing, but you guys like it. Everybody likes it. Everybody wants to know how to heal. Everybody wants me to heal them when they call me, and other practitioners and other teachers. And so we're going to talk about healing because that's what you want to talk about. Well, it's like we as a movement had given into mortal mind. Mortal mind's like, I don't want to disappear into nothingness. So what am I going to do? I'm going to concentrate on the smallest part of Christian Science and blow it up to be the largest part of Christian Science. And that other stuff, no one's even going to talk about it. Or maybe they will, because in the manual she requires them to do it. But we'll get around that some way, you know. And they do. They get around it some way. We spent, of 14 days, we spent half a day on animal magnetism and malpractice in my primary class. And it's interesting. She knew this was going to happen. She knew mortal mind, when left to itself, was going to revert back into, well, you know, we are something in and of ourselves. You know, we're, you know, if you're telling us we're not anything and we're not real, well, guess what's going to happen to you? Guess what's going to happen to your teacher? You're teaching. And so she put like so many warnings in the books, like in, you know, in Science and Health, page 57. 570. She starts on line 30. Many are willing to open the eyes of the people to the power of good resident in the divine mind, but they are not so willing to point out the evil in human thought and expose evil's hidden mental ways of accomplishing iniquity. Evil's hidden mental ways of accomplishing iniquity. We are collectively what the Bible would define as evil. It's really our thoughts staying limited, believing this world is real, and we're protecting everything we believe with, like, death. Like these people, you know, who were against segregation, they were protecting themselves from segregation with death. I mean, so much death, so much violence, so much hate. That's the evil in human thought. But it's there even now, even if we don't, you know, if we believe in the equality of man, it's there when we are, you know, believing there's another political party, and people who believe in that political party are wrong and are stupid and are bad and they're taking our country down the drain, or another country that, you know, they are, you know, idiots, they are evil, they are pure, you know, like seeing separation and seeing limitation and seeing all this is evil's hidden mental ways of accomplishing iniquity. And covering up the teachings and hiding the teachings away in a church with, you know, locked doors where you can't even like take class or even join a church without like signing you away and saying I'm the perfect, you know, Christian Zionist. Very, very little, you know, it's just locked away. The church just said, we're just going to hold these teachings here, and if you want them, you come, but you've got to conform to our moral codes and all this stuff. And that's evil's hidden mental ways of accomplishing iniquity. Hiding the truth from others until they conform with our way of seeing it. She says, Many are willing to open the eyes of the people of the power of good resident in divine mind, which is every Sentinel and journal article, every lecture. Most of my class was about the synonyms and how all the good that we are. Like we have to learn about all the good that we are when it's just who we really are. What we really need to learn is how to get out of this belief that we aren't that. But they're not so willing to point out the evil in human thought. Why this backwardness? Since exposure is necessary to ensure the avoidance of evil. Exposure is necessary, she says, but the current Christian Science Church, we believe that you don't expose error. You don't talk about it. You don't. I mean, when you talk about error in the foyer of a church or with your family, we don't talk about error. You know, error is not real, so we don't want to, and the teachers don't talk about it, and nobody talks about it. It's a superstition. But because she says exposure is necessary to ensure the avoidance of the evil. Why this backwardness, since exposure is necessary to ensure the avoidance of evil? Because people like you better when you tell them their virtues than when you tell them their vices. The marginal heading is Christly warning. It requires the spirit of our blessed master to tell a man his faults and so risk human displeasure for the sake of doing right and benefiting our race. Who is telling the mankind of the foe in ambush? Who? Is the informer one who sees the foe? If so, listen and be wise. Escape from evil and designate those as unfaithful stewards who have seen the danger and yet given no warning. So she's foreshadowing here, I believe, the current state of the Christian Science Church are unfaithful stewards. You know, the teachers who are spending 90% of their class teaching you treatments and trying to teach you who you really are, like what you really are, like you're all these qualities, and those are the unfaithful stewards. I mean, because at that level, they're supposed to know. They're supposed to know what Miss Eddy's real purpose was to appear to us. Why Divine Mind chose to have this human woman appear to us and give us these teachings. They're supposed to know why. And that's what they're supposed to carry forward, is those teachings. So, we have to she says, designate those as unfaithful stewards who have seen the danger and yet give no warning. So maybe they haven't seen the danger. I have a feeling they haven't. I have a feeling they spend 95% of their, it's generous. 95% of their time is generous, trying to heal physical illness. And the way out of it is self-examination. And don't say that word to a teacher. Don't say self-examination to a teacher. That's not Christian Science. Because they don't know that it is. Science and Health, page 570. At all times and under all circumstances, overcome evil with good. Know thyself. And God will supply the wisdom and the occasion for a victory over evil, because evil is in your thought, is our thoughts collectively. Evil is the belief of mortality, the belief that I had to get up out of bed today and I had to go have breakfast, and because I needed food, I needed sleep the night before, that I'm sitting here in front of you talking, That's all the matrix. It's all the dream. It's know thyself, and God will supply the wisdom and the occasion for a victory over evil, over our mesmerized state. Then in Miscellaneous Writings, page 355, in the article The Way, which is, hint, the way out, the way out of the dream. That's what the article is about. She says, first, self-knowledge. The physician must know himself and understand the mental state of his patient, which is our thoughts. It's us. We're always our own patient. Error found out is 2/3 destroyed. Here again, error found out is 2/3. It has to be exposed. You mean we shouldn't be like, oh, we don't talk about it. See no evil, hear no. No, error found out is 2/3 destroyed. And the last third pierces itself, for the remainder only stimulates and gives scope to higher demonstration. To strike out right and left against the mist never clears the vision, but to lift your head above it is a sovereign panacea. I know my primary class teacher was worried, in so much, in an email from him, right after class, they are worried that you're going to go after the errors. You're like, okay, you mean evil is within my own thought. It is the state of believing I'm a separate identity from soul, God. Oh, that sucks. What do I do when evil is within my own being? What am I going to do? I'm going to write a list of all the bad things I do, all my errors and all my mistakes, and and then I'm going to work on this list, and I'm going to, and the teachers are worried. They're like, oh, that'll just keep you. And yeah, that's not the way to go about it at all. That's like mortal mind. You're giving mortal mind the keys to the prison, and you're saying, find your way out. Here's the keys when you get out. It's just work your way out of it. And mortal mind's like, I don't, yeah, mortal mind can't do this work. That's why we don't write the lists of all our faults, or we don't come up with or we, even asking around and saying, what do you see in, asking your friends and family, what do you see in me that might be, roadblocks to me understanding who I really am. You're going to get a lot of opinions. You're going to get a lot of, value judgments and all kinds of things. That's all mortality. That's all mortal mind. So if the teachers are afraid of that, that's all they have to tell you. Is teach it and just say, oh, don't do it. Don't let mortal mind run the show. Let the divine mind run the show. Turn wholeheartedly to divine mind. And even so much as tell divine mind, because you just feel separate from divine mind. Tell divine mind, I will listen for thy voice, lest my footsteps stray. It's a hymn. I will listen for thy voice, lest my footsteps stray. I will follow and rejoice all the rugged way. Meaning, you tell me what to do and how to wake and you uncover these errors in my thinking, and I'll follow. But to do it ourselves and from a material or a mortal basis, that is not going to work. There was a time when a friend of mine had been learning this truth, and he had grown up with a very difficult background and done a lot of things that the world would call sinful, and I had too. And all these things that I felt guilty about, like I said, I've tried everything to be happy, tried everything to feel good, because there's always been this inner something saying there's something else out there. This, I'm not happy. I'm not content. I'm not, this this place sucks. And so it was always looking, and alcohol, sex, partying, all that stuff, which I think is pretty normal for most people. It's very few that get to avoid all of that searching, but some do. Some do for other reasons. They avoid, they get to avoid that piece of the searching for, but looking everywhere for truth or for something to make them feel better and not finding it. But what was coming to me when I started doing this self-examination, is just started listening and being open, was there was a ton of guilt there for all these things that I thought I had done wrong, or I thought that were sinful acts, or huge mistakes, and I was embarrassed about them, and so I hid them from family and friends. And so the embarrassment is mortal thinking, the guilt is mortal thinking, and they were kind of holding in all of the stuff that I had done and just covering it over and just being like, and so there was this huge mess of things that just I was locking in through embarrassment and guilt and some self-righteousness too, because I was starting to get back into Christian Science, so there was some self-righteousness there. And he did teach me, he had gone through this, and he said, why don't you sit down? Why don't we sit down one day and you tell me everything? Because I've been through it all too, and I've been through worse. And you tell me everything you've done that you're embarrassed about or you feel guilty about. And then we'll go from there and see, And I did, and I sat down with him and I spilled the beans. And it took several sessions, because I would spill the beans, everything bad I'd done, guilt, and then I'd cry, and because it was this like refreshing release just to get it out there. And then like the next day more would come up, because like I had uncovered more stuff, and by getting rid of that stuff, and then more would come up, and I'd call him again and we'd talk again, and it just kept coming out day after day until there was no more left. And it was this tremendous release. And I realized I had believed all of that about myself. I had believed I was a bad person. I had believed these human mortal acts in the delusion were real, and I really did them. And I was tremendously guilty. I felt tremendously guilty, and tremendous shame, and tremendous, all of that embarrassment. And that was like a huge step forward. And it still wasn't using the mortal mind. It was still something that, had come to both of us. And he was in a non-judgmental state. He knew none of it was real. So he was a good person to do that with. And, and it turns out, the Bible already, that's in the Bible, right? Confess your sins one to another. That's really, excuse me, where the original concept of confession comes from. The original Christian concept of confession was this: getting everything out, getting it out in the open. The mortal mind doesn't like the whole world knowing how bad it is or how bad it thinks it is. You know, that's why we're having all these things come out in the world today where, you know, different people within, you know, like either politicians or CEOs or, you know, music moguls or movie moguls, all this stuff is coming out about them and what they've done to others. And it's because it was hidden in the depths of mortal mind. And it was keeping us as a collective locked into mortality, that locked into the dream. And it had to be exposed. It had to be, you know, error found out is 2/3 destroyed. Exposure is necessary to ensure the avoidance of evil. Self-knowledge as a whole, as a collective whole mortal mind, self-knowledge is this knowledge of things that were going on and we had no idea of, but that were holding us all in this diluted sense of existence. It's in James 5:16. Confess your faults one to another and pray one for another that you may be healed. The effectual fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much. Confess your faults one to another. So if you have someone that is non-judgmental, you know, the Course in Miracles and David Hoffmeister, they teach to, you know, listen without judgment and to just be. And that there's, you know, you can Google David Hoffmeister and his teachings are all over YouTube and TikTok and everywhere. And if you want to learn that, or if you want to, you know, but even, yeah. So the self-knowledge, the self-examination, the know thyself, the teachers are afraid you're going to make too much of it. But if it comes out at the direction of the divine mind, if all this is occurring at the direction of the divine mind, of you realizing you can't do it yourself, because picking and prodding at yourself and, oh, this is your problem and that's your problem and that's your problem, isn't going to work. It actually like makes a mountain out of a molehill, and it's going to not work at all. And the teachers must to some degree know that, but rather than just teach the correct way to do it, they just don't talk about it. And the, you know, Miscellaneous Writings, page 317, the hour has struck for Christian scientists to do their own work, to appreciate the signs of the times, to demonstrate self-knowledge and self-government, and to demonstrate as this period demands over all sin, disease, and death. And then on page 358 of Miscellaneous Writings, self-knowledge, humility, and love are divine strength. Then Miscellany, the First Church of Christ Scientists in Miscellany, page 161. He who gains self-knowledge, self-control, and the kingdom of heaven within himself, within his own consciousness, is saved through Christ truth. So everywhere we're talking about self-knowledge. You know, it's a little bit like emotional intelligence is a little bit along the lines of self-knowledge. You know, like a good example of someone without any emotional intelligence, like was my dad. self-knowledge would have been the furthest thing. And even when he kept asking me in the last 10 years of his life, when he was ill, 15, he was ill for so long. And why am I not being healed? I want to have a Christian Science healing. Why can't I have a Christian Science healing? And well, what about self-knowledge? No, ain't gonna happen. I mean, he told me in no uncertain terms that was not going to happen. That's not Christian Science, and he's not gonna do it. And he was so out of touch with his thoughts and what his thinking was doing to him, his hatred of the other political party, is extreme hatred of the other political party. His extreme, he loathsome of certain members of the family who weren't living up to his expectations. He had grand expectations of everyone and himself. There was a perfection he couldn't even live up to himself, and that drove him crazy. But he wasn't aware of these things. There was no self-knowledge. There was nothing like, it's almost like you're like, is anyone there? Well, God is love, and we are God's spiritual children, and my stomach is a spiritual stomach, and I don't know why it is bloated up to like 10 times its size, but it's a spiritual idea of stomach, and it can't be anything but perfect. And you're just like looking, and that's all you're hearing. That's all. It's like this mesmerism, this across his whole being, with the inability to go within and allow for this self-examination work to happen. And this is Eddy called that state moral idiocy. I mean, in Miscellaneous Writings, page 107, line 22, without a sense of one's oft repeated violations of divine law, his hatred for disdain and criticism and judgment, and for others and for himself, without a sense of one's oft repeated violations of divine law, the individual may become morally blind, and this deplorable mental state is moral idiocy. The lack of seeing one's deformed mentality and of repentance thereof deep, never to be repented of, is retarding, and in certain morbid instances stopping the growth of Christian Scientists. Without a knowledge of his sins and repentance so severe that it destroys them, no person is or can be a Christian Scientist. He called himself a Christian Scientist, and I was not considered a real Christian Scientist to him. And that is the moral idiocy we see a lot in the church. Like, if you go to the churches, there are people that are there and they're just watching everything you say and everything you do, and they're going to like take you to task if you say anything wrong, if you talk about error, if you give a testimony that is anything used to their normal testimonies. And they're the ones giving testimonies about how their vacation was so great because they had a great vacation because they're a Christian Scientist, and how they've had no financial problems in their life because they're a great Christian Scientist. And they've never gone to a doctor, and that they haven't gone within, and there's like nothing. It's just this mesmeric state of, I'm a Christian Scientist, and that state is called moral idiocy. It's without a sense of one's oft repeated violations of divine law. And I've worked with those people as a Christian Science practitioner, And I've worked with them as a friend and as a family member. And I've seen what the effects of this moral idiocy is on their lives and the lives of their families. And, my dad called so many practitioners. And, they never were able to do anything. Their conversations were all about treatments. And they just reinforced his belief that treatments of physical illness is what we're about. So many things, so many journal articles and sentinel articles, and it's all reinforcing that to these people, that it's not helping anyone. The people, the lack of one seeing one's deformed mentality and a repentance thereof deep never to be repented of, that's stopping the growth of Christian Science movement, because these people are standing as impediments. They're at the churches, they're speaking the loudest, they're wanting to be a practitioner, wanting to be a teacher. Can you imagine? You want the cross. The higher you get up and the more you denounce evil or mortal mind, the more difficult it is for you, and the more watchful you have to be. It is any position of visibility or whatever within the movement is a cross. And they don't know that. They just want the prestige. They just want, I remember talking to a practitioner that when it was coming to me that I was going to have to leave my corporate job with a lot of money, and I was going to have to leave, and it was coming to me to be a practitioner, which was very surprising to everyone. I remember seeing an old Sunday school teacher. We were with my parents, and we saw an old Sunday school teacher and his wife, and they're like, Julie's a practitioner now, because they were still in disbelief. And the people that my old Sunday school teacher was like, and I'm like, and he was a very dear man and became very helpful to me in the future. But I was like, I know, I'm as surprised as you, because this is not my path. I love accounting. I wanted to be an accountant. I've always, that's my thing. That's my jam. I made a lot of money as an accountant, and I was young. I was working my way up. Not young. I was in my 30s. But so yeah, that was not something I chose as a mortal. That was not something I wanted to do. I would never have chosen this for myself. And I remember talking to this practitioner who I had been talking to daily, because in this process of waking up, of hearing all these things like it's time to quit the jobs, and I was incredulous, and I was ill all the time. And I told her I'm gonna have to quit my job and be a practitioner. And she's like, why? Oh my gosh, why would you want to be a practitioner, and why would you want to? And I was like, I don't. I don't. I said, I don't seem to have a choice. I don't seem to have a choice. And that was she was like, huh, okay, but, and other people I've told, to most Christian Scientists, that, it's a path. You're a righteous person. You don't do a lot of wrong in your life. You don't get mixed up in sex, drugs, and alcohol. And you go to church and you read your lesson, and one of your paths forward is you want to eventually be practitioner than a teacher. Teachers make a lot of money. Lecturers make a lot of money. Practitioners, some do, some don't. And, you know, that, and then the years that I spent talking to people who would only talk to you if you were a practitioner. Like this, the second you're a practitioner, everybody's like, comes to you, and like all of a sudden you're the expert on everything. And you're like, oh, okay. And that's all it takes. That's all it takes for a Christian Scientist to, oh, you're a practitioner, so, okay. We're gonna like, help me with this and help me with that, and and you know, and I'm like, no, I don't know, what are you talking about? Like, I can't get my child to do this. What should I do? I'm hearing something about God is the only regulator of man. Yeah, but what does that mean? And and I'm like, it wasn't. It was a very interesting time to see behind the scenes of what's going on with Christian Scientists in the field today. It's all about fixes. That I need a fix for this, and I need a fix for that, and we need a fix for this, and and when someone with heart disease is calling, and I'm only aware of the fact that they have heart disease because I just gone through it with my dad, and they're like, I don't know why I'm blowing up like a balloon, and I said, well, okay, but I got to go do Christmas shopping. So you work on that while I go do my Christmas shopping. What? You want me to go heal you while you're doing your Christmas shopping? Okay. It was like a lot of wake up moments. And then, as once I'd learned everything that I needed to learn, and I saw behind the scenes of, I saw into the back alleyways of what was going on in the Christian Science movement. I was then led to leave it all behind, including being a practitioner. And so that wanting to be it, and to like, that is really interesting. And it's a cross. It's a cross that you're taking up, and even to this day, the cross is a self-examination never stops, because we seem to be living in a mortal universe where animal magnetism is the norm. It is, malpractice is the norm. I've been malpracticed by church members. Because I no longer consider malpractice to be personal. I know that they're being utilized by the collective mortal mind to try to harm or stop my work. I'll be told the name of the individual being used in malpractice, and it's very fascinating. Very fascinating who's doing the malpracticing, who and but it further proves to me the work that you have to do to be clear and to stay clear, and to not get to me, getting caught up in mortal mind is very, very, very painful. And I, in no way, I work each day to stay clear. I weed my garden every day. Which Kimball said, Mrs. Eddy does that, but that's not Christian Science. Imagine saying that something Mrs. Eddy taught wasn't Christian Science, or like my teacher who corrected Mrs. Eddy like 3 times in class. that's all part of what we're dealing with right now with the massive animal magnetism in the church. And but now that we know what animal magnetism is, now that we know what malpractice is, the thoughts of malpractice is the thoughts of us in our delusion. And we're like hating this person. We're sending mental darts to this person, hate, and mental darts to this person, jealousy, and mental darts to this person, like, just, you're immortal. I'm immortal. Wouldn't you like to be immortal too? That's all, it's all malpractice. It's going on all the time. It's going on, 24/7. And as a church, we were given the teaching to defend ourselves against that. And we're the ones having the hardest time doing it. Teachers shall instruct their pupils how to defend themselves against mental malpractice. And that's through self-examination. That's through unwinding from the dream. Someone's mental darts towards you can't hit you if you're coming out of the dream that you're mortal into the reality and understanding that you're immortal soul. As you're unwinding from that, they're malpracticing a mortal, a human. So they're throwing darts at a picture of you in their mind, or a belief about you in their mind. That's what they're throwing their mental darts at. Their hatred, their jealousy, their fear, their worries, their anger, their, just like the people who were so angry about desegregation in the South, sending their mental darts towards these beautiful beings who were just trying to exist. But that's what we're doing to each other, even if it's just not hate. It's just, a malpractice is a bland denial of truth. I mean, even just seeing someone as not that great, or not that smart, or not that, or just like, oh, they're less, they drink all the time, they're a bad person. That's malpractice. Oh, they went to the doctor. They're not a Christian Science anymore. They're not Christian Scientist anymore. They go to the doctor, That's malpractice. Like, it is it's believing that your fellow being is immortal instead of seeing them as the immortal. And to defend yourself against it, you start winding out of being immortal. And it can't, because your identity, they're chinning, their darts are going to the mortal identity, and you no longer believe you're that mortal identity. So that's just going, it's just going right through you. But it takes practice. It takes practice, and you start out with the small beliefs, and you just, and some of them, people I hadn't forgiven, people who hadn't forgiven me, and I'm not personally forgiven. I didn't wind up having to go to people and say, I'm sorry, I have been, I haven't forgiven you for this. Just, it's a mental stuff. All this stuff is happening within our own thinking, and very rarely do we have to, go out there and tell someone. But sometimes we do. Oh, I was a royal ass to you. I thought I was so much better than you. I thought you were wrong and I was right. And I was determined to, have you fired. Or I was determined to get you kicked out of the church. Or, sometimes we do. We'll be led by the divine mind if things like that happen. But most of it's just happening within the realm of our own thinking. And so, that article, an allegory in miscellaneous writings, it's actually called an allegory. it is just such a fun article, but if you need a place to start, I would say read that article once through, just really just quickly, and then start reading it a little more slowly, and allow that article to bring up, like, things will, if you're open to it, things will start to pop up to you, like little memories, or little things. Oh yeah. With child care, like caring for children, or a lot of it was around what I thought it was to be a mother. A lot of my uncoverings were what I thought it was to be a mother, my disappointment in my husband because what I thought it was to be a husband, what I thought it was to be a father. A lot of that came up to see and be like, oh, whoa, I was really just, and it's crazy. It comes up in the most unusual places. Like I said, I had so much guilt and shame for all the mistakes I considered that I made. I considered it all mistakes. Not seeing your children. As someone called me when I was a practitioner, and their daughter never called them. And obviously she wanted that fixed. That's what she was calling, because I want that fixed. And after a few phone calls with her, and her saying, well, she's still not calling, and it just came to me to say, your daughter doesn't owe you anything. We were not put on this earth to owe our parents for bearing us and bringing us up. We are, not, if we're not mortals at all, which we aren't, then we weren't actually born to a mortal. It's a delusion, and it's a lie. And some mortal mothers are nice and good, and they're helpful, and some are not. But anyway, you don't owe them anything. Divine love will lead you if you need to. I always hear, go to your mom's and help her with this, or call your mom, or things like that. But I don't have any sense that I owe a human for anything. I'm totally, surrendered to God, and totally dependent on God for all direction, for everything that I do. And in no way, shape, or form do I believe that I owe a human parent anything, and neither do my stepchildren owe me anything. That took me a long time to get to this place. A lot of unwinding, so many beliefs under that one that that had to come and be exposed as I was becoming more and more willing to do this self-knowledge and self-examination, and to allow the divine mind to uncover all these things for me. It was just like, oh God, I was but of course, this woman, that I told her, your daughter owes you nothing. She hung up and never called back, but that's what I was led to say for whatever reason. When you're talking to patients and you're a practitioner, the important part is to only say what you're being led to say, and say nothing else. You don't know what they need to hear or not hear, and maybe nothing at all. And if I'm led to say nothing at all, I would say nothing at all. It's between them and God, and they're only calling you because at that moment their connection to God seems they're so wrapped up in the mortal dream, their connection of God, they're not hearing. It's like the phone lines disrupted, but it's not dead. And the support is that they can hear. The support that you give them is, I know they can hear. I know they can hear the truth, just as I'm hearing the truth. And that nothing can stand in the way of that. And not to think that you are responsible for anything to help. You're not responsible for it at all, except to just stay in your place of self-examination, do the work, and not, you would come out of clarity if you fell into the belief they needed you. You need to help them. You wouldn't be able to help them, not in a way that's effective. And that's the same with teachers. If you think you're teaching someone something, then you're lost. It's already, you're dead on arrival. Your teachings are dead on arrival if you think someone needs you. Something out of your mouth is needed. It is only a listen and follow. Life is a listen and follow. And you, for no other reason than listening and following. You don't do anything for any other reason than listening and following. Because the mortal state is so mesmeric and so glamorized, and so, you're so attractive that we can get caught up in, or if this person is like calling in their, I'm dying, I'm on my deathbed. You can get so caught up in that belief that you're no longer a help to anyone, much less them, much less yourself. And that's, that's the cross. That's the cross. Like wanting to be a practitioner and wanting to be a teacher, or wanting to be a high up in the mother church. You're not realizing how much of a cross it is, like how much of yourself that you're going to have to give up. Everything about yourself, your desires, your opinions, your what you think is the right way to live, what you think the right way to do Christian Science is. You don't get a choice in the matter. The more you give up of yourself, it all becomes soul, divine mind, and divine mind knows best what's needed for everyone. And it's most of the time not in line with what we think is needed. It is like it tends to be so different. And that's because we're mesmerized. We are in the mesmerized state right now, which is not our real state. And our true self, the divine mind or soul, is the only way out. So you can see how important the teaching of what malpractice is, what animal magnetism is, and how to defend yourselves. Like in the manual on page 84 for teachers, defense against malpractice is what has to be taught. Teachers shall instruct their pupils how to defend themselves against mental malpractice. Our teacher just said, it's like a voodoo spell. Like in some countries, when someone puts a voodoo spell on another person, they'll die. But like a tourist traveling there won't die if they get the same voodoo spell, because they don't believe the voodoo spell. So he's like, just don't believe it. Just don't believe animal magnetism. Just don't believe malpractice, and you'll be fine. But you already believe you're that mortal. You already believe you're the one they're malpracticing, or it's too late for that. And now it's time for the unwinding that she teaches, and that is what she knew had to happen, and what she taught her students when they left her class and they went out and they were supposed to heal. They knew that they went within and listened, and whatever needed to surface and be said, or for them to see, that's what happened. It was like, always go within, and see what is in like thine own thought. Unlike the anointed. And rest like a dove from the deluge. Sometimes I just don't get one word right, and I can't. Miscellaneous 355. Cast the beam out of thine own eye. Learn what in thine own mentality is unlike the anointed, and cast it out. Then thou wilt discern the error in thy patient's mind, and that makes his body sick, and remove it, and rest like the dove from the deluge. Physician, heal thyself. Let no clouds of sin gather and fall in mist and showers from thine own mental atmosphere. Hold thy gaze to the light, and the iris of faith, more beautiful than the rainbow seen from my window at the close of a balmy autumnal day, will span the heavens of thought. A radiant sunset, beautiful as blessings, when they take their flight, dilates and kindles into rest. Thus will a life corrected illumine its own atmosphere with spiritual glow and understanding. And that's under first, under the way, the article the way. Under first, the first step of the way is self-knowledge. We're not skipping to the third step. Everyone wants to skip to the third step, which is love. The third stage of mental growth is manifested in love, the greatest of all stages and states of being. Love that is irrespective of self, rank, or following. Everyone wants to step there, and we've made Christian Science all about love. Oh, and everyone says, oh, I love everyone. And my dad said that too. And I said, what about the politicians on the other side of the political spectrum? Well, not them. But he said, but I don't have to heal everything in the world just to have one healing. So he couldn't really jump to love. Jumping to love and missing the first step, self-knowledge. The second is humility. Jumping to the third was just creating this like very superficial, artificial Christian Scientist who had no depth or understanding of anything. And that's where so many of us are and start at. And, just a willingness and an openness and a desire to get back to Mrs. Eddy's original writings, the prose works. Miscellaneous writings is for those of us who read Science and Health our whole lives and really just never dug into miscellaneous writings, it's like so cool, and it is so full of this stuff of the unwinding, and it's stuff we haven't read as much, and so it comes off different to us. We hear it differently than the stuff that we've read every day of our lives for our whole lives. And the original Science and Health, reading her first edition or her second/third edition, which in her original class teachings. If we want to move out from the superficial, I am a Christian Scientist and you're not place where we've kind of skipped over all the steps in any of her articles, all the steps. And we just want to get to the end. We just want to get to healing. If we're ready to move out of that state and out of that misconception of being of Christian Science, and we want to actually kind of learn what the whole point of Christian Science was, and we're like ready for that, and we realize the significant gift that we were given, and that maybe it's time to take advantage of that rather than be so stuck in healing, in the physical healing of physical illnesses, then that willingness is going to lead us out of the Egypt of a false sense of Christian Science and animal magnetism. Animal magnetism is, false sense of Christian Science is also animal magnetism, because it is not going to do anything. It's like moonbeams to melt ice. It's like when she said, take away the spiritual signification of scripture, and that compilation can do no more for mortals than moonbeams to melt a river of ice. So the literal translation of the Bible that Christians are coming out of, the literal translation can do no more than moonbeams to melt a river of ice. And it's the same with the mortal, the human concept of Christian Science. It's going to do no more than moonbeams to melt a river of ice, which is, moonbeams can't melt a river of ice. It's the same today. We're dealing with the same errors repeat generation to generation, and we're dealing with the same errors that the Jewish people dealt with when Jesus came and said, oh, let's get things moving this way again. Let's keep it going. And then Mrs. Eddy said to the Christians, oh, and here we are today. We're needing that. Let's get out of the human concept of Christian Science, because it can do no more than moonbeams to melt a river of ice. But what real Christian Science is will change the world from the inside out. So have fun with self-examination. It's going to give you plenty of employment, as I know it did for me and still does every day.